regardless of your skin, regardless of your parentage, regardless of your doctrine, regardless of your background, regardless of what you've done or what's been done to you, to bring value back. The justice of the kingdom is to bring value back to valueless people, to where everyone else has told you you're not worth it. The justice, the dikasune of God is not just to make you feel as if you are His inherited, His son or daughter. That's part of it. That's an internal knowledge. But it's to bring an equality, not just theoretically, but actually an equality to the people of the earth through the message of who He is. So, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for dikasune, for righteousness, for justice. They shall be filled. Look at this. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Remember what we did in Psalms 89? And I told you, watch this close connection. Anytime you see righteousness and justice, you're going to see His close bedfellow called mercy. Look what Jesus does in the Beatitudes. If you hunger and thirst for righteousness, you're going to be filled. What's the very next thing out of His mouth? Blessed are merciful, because they'll obtain mercy. Because whenever Jesus speaks of justice, He cannot help but speak of mercy. Because for God, justice is not paying you back. For God, justice is putting you where you belong. It's bringing you into the house of mercy. It's bringing you into the presence and the heart of who He is. Blessed are the pure in heart, they shall see God. Let's put our Macarios in there again, because I just like it. Fortunate. Fortunate are the pure in heart, they get to see God. Fortunate are the peacemakers, they shall be called the sons of God. Fortunate are those of you who are persecuted for diakonos' sake. What if this is justice? What if, again, He hasn't switched over to how people live, but He switched over to the world around them? And He says, blessed are the ones of you who are persecuted for justice's sake. Where the system of this world believes they're putting justice on you. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. These are the overlooked, the forgotten, the marginalized, the outsiders. You know why Jesus has to call attention to them? Because no one else is. And when Jesus shows up, it's necessary to do that. One of the beautiful things of Jesus is His ability to elevate that which has not been elevated through the eyes of the natural, and to downgrade that which has been upgraded through the eyes of the natural. It's why He gives that very puzzling, in the kingdom the first shall be last, the last shall be first. He doesn't mean in the kingdom, if you finish in dead last place, you're the winner, and if you finish in first, no, that's thinking secular. What Jesus is saying, I believe what Jesus is saying is this kingdom does everything opposite. I elevate that which hasn't been able to be elevated, which has been squashed down. The world made it last. I make it first. And that which the world celebrates as first, that doesn't mean very much to me. Because it was all effort and self. And in my kingdom, that gets elevated that needs elevated. And it's beautiful with how Jesus, like for instance, just for instance, only one time in any of His parables does Jesus ever give someone a proper name. Because to give someone a proper name, to say your name is a familiarity. If I say, hey, you all the time, if about the 6th or 8th time, you're going to realize, this guy didn't know my name. Right? Like if every time I see you, go, hey, what's up? Hey, buddy. Hey, champ. Hey, pal. Hey, bro. But if it's, hey, Jeremiah, well, you know I at least took the time to connect the name with the face. You know, you could still be a liar, but at least you're a noble liar. You know, like I know this guy's name. So to connect the name is to give value. I value you enough to learn your name, is really what that means. And Jesus, I'm a little bit in the weeds here. I just want to get this out. Jesus only names one guy in one parable, and it's the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man fares sumptuously every day. He gets everything he needs. The system of the world, he's top of the charts. And then he dies. And then the guy who was a poor and a beggar and begged bread outside of his gate and never had anything, he gets elevated into Abraham's bosom. You know what the point of the story is? We've made that way too much about some people going to heaven, some people going to hell when they die. Jesus was talking to a people who needed to hear that nameless beggars have a name in the kingdom. And named people in the world have no name in the kingdom, because the rich man doesn't even get a name, but Lazarus gets one. And Jesus is always elevating that which is forgotten and marginalized and oppressed. Why? Because that's the dikasune Jesus came to fulfill. Jesus came to bring justice to the Lazaruses, to bring them back to that place. Move ahead. What we could do is you could really just slow work your way through the Sermon on the Mount. Watch all these powerful images and and they're worth so much study, and you can get lost in them. They're pretty sensational, but I just want to hit some highlights for you because I want you to start to think through that filter of dikosune. What if Jesus is speaking of something that isn't just my righteousness, but is the justice system of heaven? He tells them he didn't come to destroy the law, but he came to fulfill it. And he says in verse 20 of Matthew chapter 5, "For if I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." Now, what we've done is we've struggled with, in legalistic circles, we really struggled with that because we went, well, the Pharisees were considered the most righteous people in the world. So what Jesus is saying is you're going to have to live even better than they lived under the Old Testament. And no one ever tells you, by the way, that nobody lived very good under the Old Testament. You ever notice that when you're in a legalistic circle and they go, well, yeah, God's demanding even more of you than he demanded of Israel, and they had to live holy lives. And I think none of them ever lived holy lives because legalism never makes you live a holy life. It never helps. It hurts. It harms. And so we would take scriptures like that sort of through a legalistic lens and we would say, well, you're going to have to do better than the Pharisees. Well, then we had a revelation of grace and we would say, well, Jesus is saying to people, unless you have a righteousness that's of higher quality than that of the Pharisees, because the Pharisees' righteousness is performance, so you need a righteousness that's a righteousness by faith, you're not going to enter the kingdom. The problem is he didn't turn around and explain that to them. So by saying to a crowd, now unless you guys are more righteous than they are, you're not going to make it. Now none of you are going to get this until after Pentecost and the Apostle Paul writes the book of Romans and then the book of Galatians and then maybe 1 Corinthians 15 when you wake up to your righteousness you sin no more. You're not going to get this until that. But for today, just want to let you know, unless you can live better than these guys, you're not going to make it into the kingdom. What if he said this? Unless your justice exceeds the kind of injustice that these guys practice, you're never really going to know what the kingdom is like. Because what was their justice? Retributive. We caught this woman in the very act of adultery. Now, Moses says we should kill her. What do you say? What are they asking for? They want justice. They really want to corner Jesus because they realize that the message he's been preaching of justice is different than the message Moses has been preaching of justice, and it's ticked them off. But they haven't been able to corner him on it. It bugs them. It doesn't sound hard enough. It doesn't sound punch in the nose enough. What we're going to do is set him up. We're going to find a situation where he has to pick Moses or he's going to look bad. So they bring in for him the woman caught in the act of adultery, and I love it. Jesus doesn't answer, he just doodles in the sand before he answers, which I think means sometimes you need to stop and listen for the heart of the Father, because what you know printed in the book isn't the heart of the Father. You need to listen for the heart of the Father, because what was printed in the Torah said stone her to death. But Jesus knew better. He knew it wasn't Dad's will to stone her to death. But how do you get around stone her to death? You doodle in the sand and listen to the Holy Spirit. You might say, you think even Jesus had to doodle in the sand and listen to the Holy Spirit? I guarantee you Jesus had to doodle in the sand and listen to the Spirit, because his whole ministry was built on, woman, what does that have to do with me? My time has not yet come. I don't do stuff until I hear Dad do them, Mom. When Dad says do them, I do them. So every now and then you're going to get cornered. Listen, you don't have to answer really fast in life. You're in a high-pressured situation in the world where everybody thinks they have to have an opinion right now about everything. Social media did that to us. Hey, what do you think about this? I don't know. I've never thought about it. You mean you haven't thought about it? You're not a responsible citizen. You should think about it. You should have an answer. You go, gosh, I just really need time to breathe. This is the first time I've ever seen this. I don't know what I think about it. And I have been thinking about it now, and I still don't know what I think about it. So I'm just going to keep doodling. What do you think about that? But Jesus provides the kind of justice that the kingdom demands. He without sin among you, you go ahead and kill her. In other words, if you're sure that you're better than her, you can kill her. That's right. Yeah. And no one could do it because heaven's justice shines brighter and better than the justice of darkness. Because the justice of darkness is easy. You do it to me, I do it to you. I don't even have to think about it. I can be a robot and do it back to you. I can live off my animal instincts and do it back to you. But the kingdom says you got to stand up and be a man or a woman of God and figure out how you're going to respond to people. And that takes far more courage